The Poetic Soul of Jim Morrison. Ladies and gentlemen, rock aficionados, and seekers of poetic truths, welcome. Tonight, we embark on a journey, not just through the life of Jim Morrison, but into the essence of his soul. A man who shattered conventions, wove vivid poetry into melody, and became a voice that still resonates across time. More than a rock star, Jim Morrison was a mystic, a poet, a provocateur. Today, we attempt to decipher the enigma, to explore the shifting shadows of his words and music. Jim Morrison wasn't just a rock star, he was a force of nature. The man could walk into a room, say 3 words, and make you question the meaning of life. And those 3 words were probably something cryptic like, "The lizard speaks," because, Jim was on another level. Jim Morrison spoke to the dreamers, the outcasts, the wanderers who saw the world in shades of infinity. His life, like his words, was untamed and profound, full of beauty and chaos, a true reflection of the human spirit. Born on December 8, 1943, in Melbourne, Florida, Jim Morrison wasn't exactly raised by wolves, but close. He was a Navy brat. His father was a high-ranking admiral, and young Jim? Well, he preferred the open seas of poetry over the discipline of military life. The man was reading philosophers like Nietzsche and poets like Rimbaud, before most kids even figured out how to cheat on their math homework. Jim Morrison, James Douglas Morrison, entered a world of discipline and order. As the son of a naval officer, his childhood was one of constant uprooting, painted with transitions and explorations. Yet even as a child, Jim was unlike anyone else. You see, where others saw boundaries, Jim saw possibilities. Imagine being Jim's teacher, trying to get him to do a book report on the grapes of wrath, and he hands in a 3-page existential poem about the futility of existence. A+ for effort, Jim. His young mind devoured philosophy and poetry long before his peers stumbled through textbook prose. And his teachers must have been amazed and perplexed. Imagine assigning him a simple essay, only to receive an existential contemplation of existence. Jim was rebellious, yes, but in the subtlest way, through the power of ideas. For the classic rock fans among us, isn't this where many of our heroes begin? Conflict breeds vision, and Jim's roots of rebellion, nourished by literature, would someday bloom into a creative force that would change music and poetry forever. Venice Beach, 1965. 2 strangers, as different as dusk and dawn, meet amidst the fading California sunlight. When Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek crossed paths, something electric sparked. Shared dreams, big ideas, and cosmic creativity collided. Thus, the Doors were born. And man, when Jim hit the stage, he didn't just perform, he hypnotized. He wasn't just a singer, he was a shaman, a poet, a beautiful disaster wrapped in leather. And those lyrics? They weren't just words, they were spells. When Jim stepped on stage, it wasn't just a performance, it was a spiritual experience. He didn't sing, he conjured. His words tapped into something primal, something immortal. Tracks like Break On Through and Light My Fire weren't just songs, they were declarations. Declarations of freedom, of breaking societal conventions, of experiencing life in its rawest form. Now, we can't talk about Morrison without mentioning his, let's call them bold life choices, like the time he allegedly exposed himself on stage in Miami. Was it rock and roll rebellion? A misunderstood moment? Or did Jim just miscalculate a dramatic gesture? The world may never know. But Jim wasn't just about chaos. He was searching for something deeper. He wanted to push boundaries, explore the unknown. And if that meant making a few headlines, well, so be it. And any classic rock fan will tell you, the magic of the Doors wasn't just in their music, but in the poetry laden in every note, in every lyric. Jim Morrison was equal parts lead vocalist and modern-day prophet, and nothing brought that to light better than the lyrics he penned with such fearless intensity. Music was only one part of Morrison's genius. his heart truly belonged to poetry. He wrote volumes upon volumes, pouring his thoughts onto pages filled with haunting imagery and deep introspection. His books, The Lords and the New Creatures and An American Prayer, weren't just collections of words. They were pieces of his soul, bleeding onto paper. Though rock music became his vessel, Morrison's heart was always rooted in poetry. For Jim, poetry wasn't just a pastime. It was a doorway into the subconscious, a journey into the depths of the human psyche. Music gave him an audience, but poetry gave him truth. I'll imagine sitting in a dimly lit room, a single candle flickering, and Jim's voice whispering lines like, "Death makes angels of us all, and gives us wings where we had shoulders smooth as raven's claws." If that doesn't send shivers down your spine, check your pulse. "Death makes angels of us all," he wrote, "and gives us wings where we had shoulders smooth as raven's claws." Haunting imagery. Ethereal. Morrison's poetry wasn't easy. It wasn't supposed to be. It asked more of us, demanded introspection. It was poetry for those unafraid to face their own shadows. For those of us who relish thoughtful lyrics and layered meanings, Morrison's words transcend the classic rock genre. They are an invitation to set aside distractions, to savor the quiet of a candlelit room, and to journey inward. Jim's poetic gift wasn't confined to books alone. His lyrics were his verses, and every live performance was an act of poetic defiance, like a modern troubadour with a leather-clad edge. Jim Morrison, to many, a rock god, to others, a misunderstood poet. And somewhere in between, a man pursuing transcendence amid chaos. Fame amplified his unorthodox personality, and sometimes his reckless tendencies. There's no ignoring the controversies. The Miami incident, the arrests, the substance use. They painted Jim further as a rebel, for better or worse. Was he fearless or just human? Embracing fame came at a cost, and for Morrison, that cost seemed to have been inner peace. Yet through it all, his poetic hunger grew, a need to push boundaries and defy expectation. Still, it's these very imperfections that used to trouble society, but only endeared Morrison to his true fans. For those who love rock and roll and poetry alike, Morrison's life teaches us that genius rarely fits neatly within boundaries. And then, July 3rd, 1971, Paris. Jim Morrison was found dead in his bathtub. Official cause? Heart failure. Unofficial cause? A life lived too fast, too hard, too poetically tragic. He was only 27, an end, yes, but also the beginning of his immortality. He joins the ranks of the 27 Club, alongside Hendrix, Joplin, and Cobain, a group of musicians whose brilliance burned too brightly, too briefly. Morrison might have departed, but his poetry, his music, his message, they remain. Jim Morrison never wanted to be a rock star. He wanted to be a poet, a storyteller, an explorer of human existence. And in a way, he achieved that. He once said, "There are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors." And my friends, Jim walked right through. Decades later, Jim Morrison remains an enigma. His voice, his words, his spirit still haunt the world of music and poetry. He wasn't just a performer. He was a prophet of the human condition, a rebel who refused to be tamed. Jim Morrison still captivates us. For the classic rock fans, his voice is a soundscape of rebellion. For poetry lovers, his verses are a mirror to our most profound truths. He wasn't just a musician. He was a trailblazer, a seeker. So, the next time you hear "Light My Fire," take a moment. Let the words sink in. Feel the raw energy of a man who lived unapologetically, who gave us art that still burns bright. So, Anne, the next time you listen to Riders on the Storm, don't just let it play. Dive in, feel every lyric, unearth every metaphor. Because in every word, there's a piece of Jim Morrison's soul, raw, unapologetic, eternal. Jim Morrison once said, We're reaching for death on the end of a candle. We're trying for something that's already found us. A line so poetic, it still gives goosebumps. While his physical voice may be silent, his words continue to roar, stirring our spirits every time we return to them. Let's carry Jim's legacy forward. Turn up the music, rekindle your love for poetry, and, as he said, break on through to the other side. And hey, for more explorations of legends like this, tap that like button, leave a comment, and keep coming back to Trending Moment Now. Together, let's ensure that the words that matter never fade. The Poetic Soul of Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison once wrote, "The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are." And in that spirit, stay curious, stay bold, and keep the music alive. See you in the next one.